If you want to participate, contact me at ordinarywomenpodcast@gmail.com. I'm sure you have great projects to brag about. You can also follow me and message me on Instagram at Ordinary Women Podcast, on Twitter at Ordinary Women PC, or on Facebook on the page Ordinary Women. Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Ordinary Women. I'm welcoming Yana today. Hi Yana, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine. And you?
I'm fine too, thank you. Very excited to have you here. Really excited to hear everything about you. Can you
Thank you for
start?
having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for accepting to share part of your story. Can you start by giving us a quick introduction of yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Yana Spencer, and originally I'm from Ukraine. By passport, I'm British, but by my heart, I'm a citizen of the world. I'm a women's rights activist and a journalist, and also a trainer of safeguarding issues back in the UK. And also, I'm a director of Tamil Bakery, which is kind of like a charity in a normal language, but a social enterprise in the UK language, which is empowering women who've been abused or who went through gender-based violence, and I'm empowering them via therapeutic power of baking.
So impressive. I cannot wait to hear all of this. And can you tell us something unusual about you?
Probably the most unusual thing is that I can't live without baking every single day. So every single day I bake something new.
Oh my God, I love this.
Yes.
What's your favorite thing to bake?
Oh, it's difficult to say. Right now, probably majority would be Ukrainian bakes, but I like to try every single day something new. I don't like to bake the same thing every day, but obviously my friends and my family asking me for their favorite things. So, but I like to experiment.
That's amazing. I bet everyone around you eats so well. Cool. Since obviously here we talk a lot about being a woman, I like to start by asking, was there a moment in your life when you realized that you are a woman?
Probably going to be an unusual answer. Probably very later in my life, when I went to my first ever trip with my charity to Kenya, where I worked with Maasai girls in the midst of Maasai Mara land, because majority of them went through female genital mutilation and early or child marriages, and it was the first time in my life that actually I realized I'm a woman in the perspective of what they went through of discrimination and abuse which women suffer, because in my life I've been lucky enough in my native Ukraine, in England, I never experienced any gender discrimination or gender abuse. So that was the first time in the midst of that Masai Mara land that I actually belong to women who unfortunately going through a lot of struggles, and who not us going to help to the rest of us, to our sisters, to fight such abuses.
Yeah, that's so sad. I find that a lot of women realize they're women through discrimination, whether they live it, like whether we live it or we hear about other women
Yeah.
living it. Yeah. And did you grow up with any feminine role model?
Yes, I actually just a few days ago wrote a blog post about both of my grandmothers, where I wrote that both of them actually were very career driven in the both different career fields, but they were both like breakers of this glass ceiling in Ukraine. And they always taught me that, it's not that we had problems to achieve something, but that hard work can help you in life to achieve whatever your dreams were. And they were super supportive of everything that I was doing in my life. And unfortunately, both of them passed away, and one this year. But, I really find it difficult without them and their support. But I know that they were my greatest teachers and my first teachers of feminist views, and, how to help the world and how to help other women to fight for their rights if they don't have them given to them, like with a birth.
That's so great. And yeah, so great to fully grow up with these figures. Like, I love that when it's people from your family, you don't even realize how much they teach you from a very young age. It's just like normal to grow with.
Yes.
That's so great. Did you see them act for women's rights?
Again, it wasn't such an issue, in my time, in my country, in my childhood, or in my teenage years, but they were supportive of women, and they were greatest believers that whatever you want, you can achieve easily. For example, I always believed in that I want to become a police officer like my dad, like my grandfather, and it's what I've been working hard at the end of my high school. But then last minute, I won some award in writing, and everybody in my family suggested that I should try to go and study journalism. But I really didn't believe in myself in that kind of way. How could I be creative? What kind of journalist? I'm a lawyer. I'm kind of fighting for people's rights and that kind of narrative. But both of my grandmothers were very supportive. They were saying, "You're great with people. You're a great storyteller. You can do it." They were buying me lots of magazines, encouraging me to participate in different, short story competitions. So they were doing everything to support me. And then later on in my life, when I had to retrain due to some sad events and become human rights activist and women's rights activist and working for different charities in the UK. There were, again, great supporters, always listening to my stories about my travels, helping me with my fundraising, and always the first ones to support any of my crazy schemes to travel to places where it is dangerous to be a woman. But both of them were actually big, huge figures. One worked as a vet and another as the head of a huge department store. And you know that I grew up at the end of Soviet era where some of the things were very difficult to get. So people would wait months and months and months to get a TV or fridge or some any other white goods. And my grandmother became this very well-known figures because she would help every single person to get to the list to get what they really needed. So she was greatly respected for the way she handled very difficult situations. That's why I'm saying that they were the greatest figures to influence me, how to speak to people, how to find common language, how to help everybody. But
That's amazing. That's so, yeah, they seem to be like very, very, very inspiring people, both of them. That's really cool. And do you currently have any female role model?
it's probably going to be a collective picture of women of Ukraine, doctors, teachers, volunteers, soldiers who are fighting on the front line, moms who are trying to shelter their children from the sad events which are going on through the war, from the terroristic acts which are happening there. So for me, I cannot say that it's a one woman, it's a collective of women. It's my mom, it's my sister, it's my neighbors. It's famous celebrity people in Ukraine who are dedicating their lives to fundraise, to save children, to create hubs for women who went through concentration camps in under Russian regime. People who lost their relatives, people who constantly risking their lives and bringing very important and life-saving medicines and things which are needed in my country. So I've realized how brave Ukrainian women are, and some days when it's difficult, to comprehend what's going on and how far I am from my country, looking at these women all together, watching their stories on social media, reading their blog posts is giving me huge inspiration to continue with my work and helping my country as much as I can. So for me, it's a collective of many women.
That's so inspiring and powerful, I would say, what you just said. Yeah. How do you still manage to find all of these role models even though you don't live there anymore?
Ukrainian nation is right now getting reborn, people say. We're putting like our differences aside and we're all just fighting for the future of existing, really, because of the genocide which is happening against us. You just follow, you know people from your country who's doing the work. It's a local volunteers. This summer I've done food talks at the art festival back in Como, where kind of our home is, and lots of just the local Cornish women coming to the talk to support Ukrainian women via me. So it's this connection, of connecting people and their concern for each other, for children, for women, for when the war started, being where I am, I'm not allowed to fundraise as a foreigner based in the Middle East. I'm not allowed to campaign. I'm not allowed even to mention many times that I'm from Ukraine. So what I found at the beginning, it was very, very difficult. But later I decided to turn it into some sort of creativity. So I had to sit down and assess, what can I do for my country? And I realized actually, I love food. I love writing about food. So I've cooperated with a lot of celebrity chefs in Ukraine, translated their cookbooks, baking books into English language, and we sold them in exchange of donations, and got a lot of money towards children's hospitals to treat wounded children who survived very horrors of this war. So it's just the way how you see situation, how you can transition from your anger, from your kind of hopelessness to something that you are good at. So it's a storytelling and translation, it's connecting people, fundraising where you can. So I guess just finding connection to your land and to your country where you were born, and standing up for what is right, really.
Yeah, that is so brave, and that might be so hard to find the energy to fight despite the like injustice of it all.
Yeah, but then when you think what people are going through at the local places, it's
Mm.
for them it's harder, right? Rather
Yeah.
than for us who are far away. But to be honest, again, saying that this summer I traveled back home and I actually realized being there it's much easier for mental health, because you're being with people, you're seeing what's going on, and you're able to help them in some way. But when you're far away, it's much more harder because your mind kind of racing, and every day you're starting from message from your family, we're alive, we're okay, and you kind of you can start on with your day and do what you can to help, parallel with your job, parallel with your family, and other commitments. But that's life, and that's what what comes with the package of being Ukrainian nowadays, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I guess right now it must be especially hard, but yeah, it's so inspiring and brave what you're doing. Yeah, that's really amazing. Going back a bit before talking about like your project or achievement, going back a bit on your womanhood, I guess. Do you think that the lack of representation of women in society had an impact on you?
I would say that one aspect of it, when I was little girl, I remember listening to my dad's stories about police forces in Ukraine, and I realized how little amount of women were joining the forces. So in my first year of university, I volunteered to do a big investigative piece for the local newspaper about why women are joining, or why such little figures, what's stopping them. So I definitely remember that this aspect I always was kind of like wondering about, why is it, like society, is it the gender roles, is it gender stereotypes, is it some, childcare lack of it, or what is that stopping them? That one I definitely remember. But I would say, is it not in every single profession, or not in every single way of life that I have noticed that. But later in life, of course, with dealing with issues that I'm dealing right now, it's definitely what I realize on a daily basis.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially since you deal with that so much with your work. Thank you for sharing this. So interesting. And yeah, I'd like to jump on kind of the second part of this podcast and talk about something you achieved or a project you did and that you're proud of. So what would you like to talk about?
Probably about Tamu Bakery, my charity, my baby, which helps
Hmm.
hundreds of women around the world in more than 15 countries.
That sounds amazing. What's the name?
Tamu, Tamu Bakery. Tamu, in translation from Swahili, means sweet and delicious. The name came to me on my first trip, which I mentioned, to Kenya. Basically, going back to explain how it all
Hmm.
became life. So, as I mentioned before, I worked in broadcast in my native Ukraine. I was a TV presenter, TV editor. I was filming, political programs, educational programs. And when I moved to UK, I worked again in different magazines, PR, advertising. And unfortunately, I was diagnosed with a very rare type of lung cancer, which is only 200 people of the world at that time had. So not much was known about it. So I had to go through a very serious operation, and I didn't know whether I would, make it or not, because at the time nobody knew exactly what type of cancer I had, and I was only in my mid-20s, and I just had my baby son. And I remember on a very bright morning, recovering in hospital after that operation, lung cancer nurse came to me, and the room was full, as you can imagine, of all the people, and I was there. And I never smoked. I never, I couldn't understand why I was there. And I remember talking to her, and she was reassuring me, saying, "We have to wait for results of the operation. Hopefully, this is the end of it, and you will live on." And I just promised to myself at that time and that moment in that hospital bed, if I'm going to make it, I want to change my life and do something for people. And it didn't take me long. I came back home and found out that my boss basically told me to go because he didn't need sick people. And I was recovering at home. I haven't had an idea what I'm going to do. And I received a phone call from one of my friends who told me about this amazing job which been set up for Black and minority ethnicity women in UK in a charity, helping them basically to assimilate into the society, running different classes for them, different activities. So I started getting involved in this kind of role, which I really enjoyed. But more and more that I was working with women in different NGO settings, I've realized that there are way more problems that we understand. One of them, female genital mutilation, forced marriages, honor killings, rape as a weapon of war, and homicides, femicides, and all sorts of others. So I realized that my job was not enough. So I decided, with the support of my very supportive boss at the time, to go on a trip to Kenya, to Masai Mara land for 2 weeks to do kind of like human rights classes for the girls. That was my kind of goal. When I arrived there, of course, I was talking a lot about food, Ukrainian food, British food, and imagine there are no electricity. People live, in a very basic kind of circumstances. And the girls asked me, "Please, could you bake us a cake? We really would like to try something sweet." So we baked a cake without electricity on a hot sun. It took us all night. But the next morning, when we've tried the cake, girls started singing, dancing in the Maasai kind of, style. And the only word I understood was tamu, tamu, tamu. And that meant sweet and delicious. So I came back home, set up social enterprise, call it Tamu Bakery, and it became my mission to basically fundraise my money via baking cakes for specific events like weddings or special caterings, also providing a lot of different consultancies, for example around trainings for GPs, for police officers in the UK, or writing articles for magazines. All this money I create, I spend on going to one of the countries, choosing one of the projects, for example Kyrgyzstan, bride kidnapping, or Nepal, working with victims of sexual trafficking. I partner with grassroots NGO. They come, buy a lot of flour, eggs, butter, advertise it as a baking classes for women, so that in those patriarchal societies, women allowed to come participate. But actually, when we start baking and I'm telling them what has happened in my life and what I can offer them, women start sharing the experience. So it's starting working, first of all, as psychological support, socioeconomic support. For example, in Kosovo, with women who survived rape as a weapon of war, a lot of my clients were the very old women who were survivors of that terrible gender-based violence. When we started working, they were not able even to smile. At the end of my trip, we were dancing, we were talking, we were sharing recipes, and women decided to actually set up their own local bakeries where they can fundraise money for their own lifestyle. The same in Rajasthan in India, in the midst of desert. I've been asked to actually create a cookie which would be very fulfilling for malnutrition children who live there. So projects vary from country to country, but the main goal is to help women. And up to now, like I said, I've been in 15 countries doing different projects depending on one-to-one, but the main kind of, the main communicator is just that I'm doing baking with women, explaining to them what I have been through and helping them in the ways that I can, whether it is setting up the bakery, whether it is, helping them to deal with psychological effects of what kind of issues they've been through, or fundraising for their charities, or etc. So that's in a nutshell.
That's so amazing. Like
Thank you.
I don't even have the words, honestly. It's so amazing. Um and it must be so powerful to leave like all these experiences and meeting all these people who survived
Yeah.
the worst. That must be hard. How do you manage that?
Oh, that's a question I'm asked a lot actually.
Yeah.
It's, for me, it's okay. No, not because I've got a thick skin. No, every single story I put from my heart. It's difficult, but I take it as a part of the job. I guess this is working with people, for people, the same as a journalism. Sharing stories, and I'm able to leave it there and park it there and not bring it home. For example, for me, much more harder to deal with the stories of cancer, or people, experiencing cancer stories. With that, I can't deal. For me, it's a big no, big no zone. But with gender-based violence, because I think I've been doing it more than 10 years, and of the stories that I have experienced and what I have seen, you wouldn't, probably the worst one been one of the recent stories in Nepal. One of the really renowned photographers joined me on 3 of my trips. She was with me in Vietnam, Rajasthan in India, and recently in Nepal. And in Nepal, we were working with victims of human trafficking. And we went to one of the last projects there, one of the smallest charities, and one woman basically comes, she behaving not normally. You understand that she has been through something really terrible. She's very neglected. She behaves in some ways, like a person who lived maybe in a jungle, who hasn't been with people, and she's trying to put my hand on her head. And the head of the charity telling me, basically, this lady was rescued last night by some people from Europe, and in your face she sees you as those people who saved her life, and in her way to put your hand into her head, it's like she's asking, like to be blessed, and she's thankful to you. And for me, it was really astonishing moment. You don't even realize how many women are going through human trafficking in Nepal, how big problem it is, and how many charities are fighting that, and how much more work it needs to be done. So every story is different, every problem is different. But when you see the result of your work, I guess this is what makes you to go and keep doing what you're doing, no matter how many different threats I get from people, how dangerous this type of work. Like in Kenya, on my first trip, I thought that I was human trafficked because people who were supposed to pick me up didn't turn up, and in the end it was a very very big problems for me and for my family back in the UK. So every trip comes with its own problems, but in the end of it, yes, you're making amazing friends, you're making impact maybe in somebody's life, and they make impact on my life, because amount of resilience, bravery, and ambition to change what's going on in society, and those human rights abuses which women and little girls are going through. One of my youngest clients were 9 years old, and she was married to 54 years old man. So, when you look at that, you think, how could I find this work difficult? I have to do something to support them and to help them.
Yeah, that both makes sense and is incredibly brave. And how do you protect yourself? Because as you said, it's incredibly dangerous, basically what you're doing. How do you manage to stay alive, I guess? How do you protect yourself?
Oh, well, you live on adrenaline. Of course, you take every single precaution. You just being sensible. You're letting your loved ones and your colleagues know where you will be. I always partner with a local NGO who's basically hosting me. You're getting all sorts of equipment for staying alive, and in majority of the cases it's all okay. It's not that bad, but I would say that probably one of the most dangerous places which I experienced and actually lived in a country was Sri Lanka. I would say that gender-based violence there, it's nothing that I ever experienced in any other countries, because they are one of the first places in the world, even in terms of incest. So you can imagine their kind of attitude towards women generally. But it comes, every country is different, every situation is different, but in general it's always okay if you are staying sensible, you know how to behave yourself, you know how to withdraw from danger. There are sometimes comical situations in Kenya. Again, the head of this center where rescue girls are living, she was out of the country, and except of a few teachers and me, there were no adults. And one day this Maasai dad turns up with his spear and shouting at us something in Swahili. I don't understand what he's saying. He's throwing his spear. I was really scared. I didn't know what he wants, but he was basically very angry that his daughter ran from home and that she didn't want to go through FGM, and he was very angry. And at that time you don't understand what's going on. Now you look at it and you laugh and kind of a story to tell your children, but at that time wasn't funny. But you just manage.
Well, yeah, that's incredible. And again, so brave. Yeah. And you also mentioned that sometimes you can't do like the lectures or the workshop that you're doing because of the politics of the country, like you're not allowed.
Yeah.
And so you do these like cooking activities or something like that.
Mhm.
And then it's you add the more human rights or
Right.
political or both dimension to that. How do you manage to both hide it from like the politics and the authorities there, but still make the people there understand and women there understand that you're here to help them?
First of all, I never touch politics. I never touch any policies. That's not my capacity. I'm coming to help women. And my workshops are truly about the cooking, first of all, because when you bake, it's been kind of already proved by many scientists, the same as cooking, that you relax, you're able to, it's a kind of like a type of mindfulness. So you forget about experiences you went through. It's helping you to heal. So first of all, yes, women come and we start cooking or baking. And during these sessions, first of all, I always tell them my story, that by now I survived actually 2 cancers. So, my story is this is what I've done. And I hope that I can inspire them to do something as well, to change their life and maybe to survive whatever experiences they're going through. And maybe on the second or third session, women start trusting you, start feeling more comfortable. First of all, they start sharing their recipes with you, their cookies or their cakes or their breads. And then we're starting sharing experiences. And of course, it's a lot of the times it's disclosures. But like I said, I always partner with a local NGO at whose premises we always do this kind of workshops. So there is always member of staff who's dealing with a safeguarding issue or with disclosure, who is able to help them in any kind of ways that I can't. But usually my sessions work, it's kind of, I don't know, I don't really like this word inspirational, but hopefully like a showing, light at the end of the tunnel. And I know definitely hearing from a lot of NGOs after I left, people always kind of refer to that and they say, oh, if Yana was able to survive with 2 big illnesses, and we can do this, or we can, be empowered to set up some, I do not know, like a business for ourselves, or we can cook. Or for example, in Oman, where me and my family, we lived there actually for 4 years. There is no such a big issue, let's say, with gender-based violence, but there are definitely women empowerment issues where women needs to be more economically maybe independent. And I was invited to one of the fishing villages there where women can't survive anymore, just supporting their husbands with fishing business. They needed to do something. So they created this great, like a cooperative where they sewing different, like, arty things to sell to tourists. And we came up with this idea, why can't you cook for those tourists who are coming from different, places, especially it's a seaport, so you get a lot of ships coming there. So they started cooking, they started baking some Omani dishes, and it actually creates more, kind of people coming to them and creating some more women empowerment really tools for them to survive and to support their families. So again, in every single country, it works in a different way. It's not necessarily uh, everywhere you have to come and just fight with a sword and say stop FGM or stop homicides, or such a thing. So it just comes with its own package, and you just have to adapt and see what women want. For example, before moving to Middle East, I always put a sign of equal between forced marriage, child marriage, which is both, against human rights abuses, with arranged marriages. But actually, living here and listening to women, arranged marriages often do work for them, because arranged marriage, yes, it's arranged by your family members, but one or two people need to, two people really need to say yes to that. And majority of the cases, it's work. So, we can't say that all arranged marriages not okay, for some countries, for some people it's work, as long as people have a choice. So again, every single place teaches me something new about women, about their rights, about women empowerment. In the Middle East, the amount of divorces right now is huge, which is again something I never knew about. So women standing up, if they don't like, for example, what their family arranged for them in their marriage, they will apply for divorce, which is maybe before they wouldn't have a choice to do. Women in the Middle East, women are one of the most educated, parts of the world, but just we need to help them maybe to access the workforce. So again, it's how you look at the problem, or is it a problem really, or how can we help them? And do we need to help them?
Yeah. And so when you go, do you know, because I guess you don't know like who you're gonna find, and you probably don't know that much about the culture, or like there's, as you just say, there's just only so much that you can know if you don't live there. So do you know what you're gonna do? Or do you kind of like go in there once you're there?
No, of course, no. We have a special protocol. Of course, I got my CRB check, DBS check. You contact organization, you make a proper plan. You get a brief about the clients with whom you're going to work, because it's all serious. Some people are more abused than others. Some people can't even talk or handle abuse. In Vietnam, I worked with very sensitive issues of people, of young children who were extremely abused. I was not even allowed to use the word gender-based violence or sex trafficking or prostitution or anything, because how fragile those kids were, or those young people were. So, of course, you come, you start baking, you talk just only about yourself or how you found baking helping you. You start maybe talking about other projects where you have worked. Maybe you could show pictures. Sometimes I don't speak the language. I have to use translators or volunteers. But, the common language of food, love, smile, and it always works.
Oh, that's, yeah, it's so warming among all these quite tragic stories. And how did you do it? So like you mentioned that, yeah, you had your boss helping you to go to your first trip to Kenya, but like how did you do it?
I just did it completely by myself. My boss was just helpful in terms of arranging my holiday. To go and do it, you do a lot of work. Like I said, I do a lot of consultancy work. I create a pot of money for every single trip, which takes some time. You partner with NGO, you research a problem, you research country, or you already know this country and this problem, and then you just set up the whole trip and your kind of time frame and what you're trying to achieve and your kind of goals, and did you achieve them. Some places it's work, some not. For example, Kyrgyzstan bride kidnapping worked out that people just wanted kind of goods from the UK. They were not really interested in participating or doing anything. They just wanted some donations from kind of like from what they perceived rich European countries. So each country comes with a different, I guess, setbacks and frames, but yeah, every single trip takes a long time to prepare, to arrange, to research, to fundraise, to earn for. So because, as you can imagine, money is not right now readily available in Europe for this kind of project. You have to do it all by yourself. But saying that, I maybe how many years? Maybe about 10 years ago, the situation back in the UK in charity sector was a bit better. Sometimes I had actually funding to do it from different cosmetic organizations. For example, in UK, I've done a very successful project working with refugee women in the southwest. So I was covering Bristol, Devon, Como, working with refugees and asylum seekers, doing this kind of workshops as well. So, like I say, you just have to be passionate about what you're doing and wanting to make a difference.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Have you ever had to give up on an idea or a project because there were too much restrictions or something like that?
Yes, of course. It's not all rosy work.
Yeah.
I would say that my current place where I live right now, yes, there was a project which I had to give up because you realize that people may be not ready or what they want is different from the way you do this kind of work. Every place has its kind of difficulties, and not in every place you're allowed to do this kind of work. So again, you just adjust and do something else. For example, in the Middle East, I'm more asked actually to write and to use storytelling for cookbooks or to tell women's stories via, writing about their family traditions. So I see it as a positive thing as well. At least women, it works as a women empowerment. They're ready to talk about their culinary heritage or, their stories of how it is important for them to be a woman, but not necessarily going baking with them and talking about GBV.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. And we talked a lot about all the challenges or like about a lot of different challenges that there are. Was there anything that was easier than you thought would have been?
Oh, I don't know about easy. Hardest, I will tell you one thing, definitely. Hardest that I thought always saying goodbye to my family every time I go. I think that would be okay, but every single time it's very, very hard, especially saying goodbye to my son, knowing to what kind of projects you go to. But easiest, it's a very good question. I guess connecting with people, that's the easiest than you think, because sometimes, let's say, you go into some really reserved cultures, right? And you think, oh, I don't know how they would relate to me and that kind of stuff. For example, I was really kind of worried about how I would be met in Rajasthan because it's one of the most closest parts of India in terms of women are really abused by their husbands. It's a huge domestic violence rate. And I was working with untouchable caste as well. And but I partnered with an amazing NGO who does a lot of work with women. Not only they running all sorts of self-defense, English classes, literacy classes, they as well setting up for them like a special workshops teaching them to sew. They're able to sell their things to tourists. They're able to provide for their families. That way they're empowering themselves. Their husbands start like basically respecting them a bit more. So but I was really amazed by the warmth of these women and how they met us and how open they were about their experiences. Probably was one of the easiest place to connect, and I thought it would be one of the hardest.
Yeah, that's so great. And it's so I mean, I love just thinking about the fact that it's something that, cooking, you kind of have to some degree, you do have to cook every day, but you don't necessarily think about it because you have to eat, right?
Yes.
Um, but it's amazing to see how something that you don't even think about can create so much when you use it in such a great way and like creative way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
And I mean, I can already see so many reasons for this, but why are you proud of it and of yourself?
I guess that I can show to women who are at some low points of their lives, no matter of the reason, that you can overcome that. And I guess showing them that if I overcame my problems, that they can overcome theirs. I guess this is my biggest pride, really. It's not numbers of people I have helped, not awards I have got for that, not appraisal I get from people for that. I do it purely to help as many people as I can. And it's, again, going back to that day, back in hospital in the UK, as I promised myself, I want to do something to help people. So that's the reason, I survived. So I would say that, yeah, proud to still be here and to do something for others.
Yeah, that's so great. Honestly, that's, yeah, such a powerful and incredible thing. Thank you so much. I think we're gonna conclude this discussion. Is there anything that we didn't talk about and that you wanted to mention?
No, I will only say, probably, to if anyone is listening to us and going through some difficulties in their lives, I will just say, try to stay resilient, try to take, yes, every day comes as it comes, whether you're fighting domestic violence, whether you're fighting cancer, whether you're just going through depression, whether you're going through financial difficulties, lack of jobs, lack of childcare, lack of support from anybody. Just keep going. At the end it will get better. Like they say in this famous Indian film, if it is not great, then it's not the end. So I'm a big believer in that. And remember that there are support over there for no matter what help you might need, especially if you live in Europe, and even if not in Europe, there is a lot of charity organization people who are ready to help you. So just stay positive, try to believe in yourself, and you overcome any hurdles.
This is such a great message that concludes such a great episode. Thank you so, so much for sharing all of this. I'll add any of your link if you want anyone to be able to find any resource that you have, or any link or anything in the resources of the podcast. Thank you so much for your time and for your story.
Thank you very much for having me.
And as usual in this podcast, the guest gets the very last word. So the mic is yours.
Uh, Before you judge anybody every single day, just try to think what those people might be going through. And at the end of the day, every single woman is extraordinary.